Now, the Ladies Gaelic Football Association has said it is developing a policy around transgender players after there was an objection to a transgender woman playing in a Ladies Shield final in Dublin last week. In a moment, we'll talk to Daire Dempsey, the Education Officer for the Transgender Equality Network Ireland. But first off, we're joined by the Sunday Independent reporter, Mark Tighe, who broke the story on Sunday. Mark, just tell us about this controversy in relation to the Ladies Shield final.
Good morning, Shane. Yeah, so last Wednesday there was a match between an LGFA match, Ladies Gaelic Football Association match between Gael Erica, who are kind of the GAA's first specifically open LGBT team set up, and where they have a policy of a player can play for their men's team or their ladies team on which team they feel comfortable with. They're playing the Fianna E up in Moby Road in Glasnevin in a Shield final, a Junior J match, and it was the first time the Gael Erica actually won a bit of silverware. They won 7-11 to 105. And before the match, there was an objection from the Fianna. They saw a transgender player, Giulia Valentino from Italy, who's kind of been out there and quite an outspoken person, who's objected to kind of the rules that have come down from World Rugby. There's a player who's also played rugby in Ireland at a club level. And so the Fianna objected to the referee, said, there's a person there, we think, is that a man? The referee, I'm told by a source at the match, thought it was a backroom player. The match started. After 2 minutes, this player, Giulia Valentino, won a high ball. Next time the ball went out of play, the referee went over to Gael Erica and said, there's an objection to that player. Your number 21 is a man. The Gael Erica captain pointed out, no, that's a transgender woman. And the referee basically said, this is the Ladies Gaelic Football Association, and said that there could be an objection or an appeal to the match by Na Fianna. The game did proceed, and this player did continue to play, was brought off as a blood sub, came back on, I'm told, and then played up till half-time and was substituted. Now, this kind of erupted as a controversy on Twitter. There was a photograph of the semi-final match with Ballyboden and St Enda's for the same player. It was highlighted, they're a tall person, they're slightly balding, and it caused a lot of controversy. It was claimed falsely that the player scored 2-9 in the match when they didn't score at all. That it scored half of the team's points. And we did ask the Ladies Gaelic Football Association, what are the rules here? Because some sports have developed very specific rules. They said, they're working with the GAA to develop policy in this area. They also pointed out to me that anyone who's properly registered is allowed to play, and that's kind of where they left it. There's no specific rules, I think, they basically have on this at the moment.
Okay, did they give a timescale for when they may develop a policy or rules in this area?
No, they're quite sketchy when I try to get them on specific details on how long they've been working on this. Like Gael Erica obviously been held out, and by both the GA and the LGFA. It's very good development. They have encouraged people from the LGBT community to play, but no, they hadn't any specific details on when they would decide or finalise that policy.
Okay, Mark Tighe of the Sunday Independent, thanks indeed for talking to us. Let's bring in Daire Dempsey, Education Officer for the Transgender Equality Network Ireland. Daire, thanks indeed for talking to us. What's your reaction to this controversy, to this story?
Thanks. I suppose my kind of main thing throughout this whole thing has just been to try and keep a little bit of perspective on this. I think when we talk about kind of the numbers of people maybe that we're looking at in Ireland in terms of trans women, like who are doing sport, like we're talking 1% of the population maybe is trans, of which obviously a smaller percentage would be trans women, a smaller percentage again doing like any sport, and then even less in any one sport. So we're not talking about kind of a huge kind of movement of people into women's sport. We're not talking about kind of changing the face of women's sport.
Sure, yeah.
Really, we're talking about a handful of players in any one sport, and obviously this whole controversy has erupted because of one person who played one match. And really, when we look at the benefits of sport, and we look at the benefits of sport at local level and at club level, we're looking at kind of mental health, physical health, a sense of community, a sense of belonging. And I think promoting people and kind of encouraging people, particularly from a very marginalised community, to engage with sport and to engage with their local communities is only beneficial. And, you have kind of trans players who are already playing in clubs, who are already welcome in clubs, who are already valued members of their communities, and really trying to encourage that and trying to appreciate that and value that. It really only enriches us all, I think.
Okay.
So,
no, absolutely, and well said. But Daire, I suppose I've been talking to a number of people about this story, and I actually coach women's GA or ladies GA at an underage level, and everybody I've spoken to would echo that, and none of them would be biased or bigoted in any way, and it will be very much let's embrace everybody. I suppose the concern that is expressed though is the possible safety implications involved in a sport that can be physical at times, and if you have someone who is a transgender woman but is physically, and let's talk in a general sense rather than about the game that happened, because it's not fair to focus on an individual, but in a general sense, if you have someone who is much physically stronger, much physically bigger playing a game, there is a safety issue for the rest of the players playing against that player.
Yeah, I suppose kind of when you're thinking about that, it's obviously really important to think about player safety, and I would obviously be a huge advocate for like players across all sports and participants to be safe in as many ways as we possibly can, obviously in terms of encouraging people to engage with sport as well. I suppose when we talk about trans women, it's really important to remember that there is no one way to be trans. There is no one body type that trans women have. Just like any other woman, just like any other person, everybody varies in size, shape, physicality. Not all of that will translate into being really good at whatever your sport is.
Absolutely.
As well. But there are also ways of promoting player safety and promoting well-being that don't blanket ban an entire population group because of assumptions that we're making about who they are and how they play. There are ways for coaches and refs to ensure that players are kept safe, just as you would, when there are any other players who are maybe a bit bigger or maybe a bit stronger than someone on your team. You have ways of ensuring that they are safe. And my understanding, certainly in ladies football as well, is that it is a non-contact sport too. So I think trying to ensure that we're keeping people safe, we're keeping people well, and that includes our trans players rather than banning them, is going to make our sports better and more equitable.
You're absolutely right to say that technically ladies GA is a non-contact sport. The reality is, though, and I know this from coaching it, I know I've refed games in it, it often isn't non-contact because you do have collisions, unintentional collisions, players going for the same ball and colliding. And people would be concerned that if you have one player who is physically of a much greater stature, physically of a much greater size, and that there is the potential for real harm to be caused, and they're genuinely concerned about that. I mean, do you understand where they're coming from in relation to those concerns?
Oh, of course, no, absolutely, of course I do. I think in any kind of, as you said, I mean, you're very right to point out, like, obviously collisions do happen, and I think in any kind of sport where you have that, be it football, soccer, even like basketball, that kind of stuff, like where players do collide, I think there just are ways of managing, who's marking who's playing against who, so that it is played kind of in a fair and equal way. And obviously, ensuring that there's no foul play, that there is no excess violence, that there's no excess physicality, goes a long way to making sure that people are safe. There are already, even within women's sports, men's sports at the moment, like there are already players who are, as I said, bigger than others, stronger than others, faster than others, whatever it might be. People do vary hugely across sports. And again, I would kind of note as well that we're looking at kind of amateur level sports here, club level sports. So even you'd have variations in terms of who's played the sport for longer, all of that sort of stuff. So, we're already, as sports people, I think, able to manage that and able to make sure that, people are being treated fairly and kept safe at the same time.
Just before I let you go, you probably haven't even a story in the Irish Independent today, which you may not have seen. So feel free to sidestep this question if you wish. The Irish Independent reporting today that the Irish Rugby Football Union may ban transgender women from female contact rugby competitions as it carries out a review of its transgender policy. It's understood it may follow a recent decision by the English Rugby Football Union to no longer allow transgender women to compete in female contact leagues. Do you want to comment on that in any way, Daire?
I mean, it'll be no surprise for you to hear that we're very disappointed. Obviously, in that decision as it came out of the UK, we have been following the IRFU kind of as it develops. But we would obviously be very disappointed in a blanket ban on trans women in rugby for all of the reasons just outlined. My understanding, and again, bringing it back to that case of perspective, my understanding is a blanket ban on trans women in Irish rugby would affect, I believe, 3, maybe 5 players across the country. And the impact that ban would have on, these players who just want to play, who just like rugby, who are, as I said, valued members of their local clubs, is going to be huge. It's going to have a hugely negative impact on those people, on anybody, any trans person who wants to play sport, not even necessarily to compete, but just to play sport. And it's not going to have, I don't think, much of an impact on women's sport overall. Again, because we're looking at such small numbers of players. Okay. So yeah,
we will leave it there. Daire Dempsey, Education Officer for the Transgender Equality Network Ireland. And before that, Mark Tighe, Sunday Independent reporter. Thanks to both of you for joining us. Let us know your views. It's a very contentious issue.